His first one comes from, which sometimes is certainly, we see it in practice occurring, is the whole issue of capital punishment within Islam. Dr. Saab, perhaps I could start with you on this one. And with specific reference, he talks about chaste women and the whole issue of, if adultery has been committed, that what is the punishment? And he also suggests that, it's often practiced, and indeed it's said that it should be flogging is the punishment which should be given, 80 stripes, and never admit their evidence thereafter, and they refer to a Quranic verse. His question is sort of putting it in the current context, and he says with the progress of CCTV and indeed DNA technology, and we often see that crimes are often solved across the world on this basis, is there still a need for the 4 witnesses which are also proposed? Dr. Zaid Saab.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Yes, Dr. Sadiq Budhan Saab asks a question relating to the subject of adultery as a whole. And we know that in Islam, chastity is a moral issue which is given great importance in Islam for the betterment of society. And when any social crimes are committed, then these obviously have to be taken into context in that sense. Adultery is a heinous crime, which obviously not only the individuals suffer because of that, but as a whole society tends to suffer because of that. And in this particular verse that he has referenced is regarding the onus of the proof, and it is to do with the witnesses who make an allegation against a couple that adultery has been committed. And the Holy Quran says that you should bring 4 witnesses who should testify to this. And in this particular verse, the question that is being asked is that if they are not able to bring those 4 witnesses, then what is the punishment for them in failing to do that? It should be also remembered that, yes, it is 4 witnesses, but it is the accuser plus the 4 witnesses. So we are talking about the witness of five people as that is concerned. This is primarily to discourage slander and scandal mongering in society. And this is, in today's society, something that has become rampant, both here in the East and in the West. And if an allegation is made against someone who happens to be innocent, even though their innocence may be proved, their lives are often ruined, aren't they, because of that?
Yeah, you often see the accuser making it because they have some, particular axe to grind, and suddenly a whole reputation is destroyed.
Absolutely. That is why Islam has insisted upon this system of making sure that the allegation can be proved in that minute detail. However, when we look at it, whether there is an option to use technology in that sense, Islam as a general does like the use of technology wherever it can for the betterment of mankind. But in this instance, there can be issues and there can be problems as such, as we know that technology can never be infallible, and there is always a possibility that something could be tampered with in order to get the evidence that the accuser wants to get in that respect. And we see in this computer-generated age, CGIs come out, and we can never tell by looking at them whether these are computer-generated images or whether they are in fact real images to that sense. So that is why technology, there can be problems in that. It could be also considered as entrapment, that this CCTV images have been used in order to entrap someone and have been used in the wrong sense. So in that respect, on that basis, it should not be used. But most important of all, in light of this verse of the Holy Quran, is that if a case does come to the courts, there is no possibility of cross-examining the CCTV images. In the 4 witnesses plus the accuser, the judges and the barristers have an option of carrying out a thorough cross-examination of the witnesses to make sure that what they are saying is going to stand up to scrutiny. Islam also, on the other hand, is very particular about the individual's privacy. And this is a subject that we come across in our day-to-day life also here in the West, because CCTV cameras are everywhere, but the public is aware of that. And on the other side, the balance of privacy question is always to be considered. The Holy Quran actually is very specific on the subject of privacy. And this verse of the Holy Quran that I'll reference for you, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تدخلوا بيوتا غير بيوتكم حتى تستأنسوا وتسلموا على أهلها. He says, O ye who believe, enter not houses other than your own until you have asked leave and have saluted the inmates thereof. So this is very specific, that privacy has to be looked after, and that you must not be able to enter houses without the permission. As far as today's technology is concerned, and I think we are made aware that apart from CCTV, there is technology whereby the powers be can actually look into houses and also and put hear what's going on into houses. You never know, we might even be being watched and being heard somewhere there in.
Well, we hope we are being watched, being watched on fake methods.
Absolutely. So this is something that Islam is very particular about, that privacy has to be looked at, and keeping those things in mind, then CCTV is not an option to use those images in that respect to prove the onus of guilt of someone who has been accused in this respect.
Jazakallah, Dr. Saab, just very briefly on that, if I could come to you in the context of DNA technology. One thing that Islam, where Islam stands with embracing advancement and science and technology. DNA technology quite often, indeed we've had recent cases here in the United Kingdom, where on the basis of DNA we've found murderers who've committed quite heinous crimes, and 10, 15, 20 years on, because the advancement of science. We don't have the double jeopardy rule here, so they've been retried, and partly on the basis of DNA technology they've been convicted. What's Islam's stance in a more general sense in this embracement of technological advances?
Well, again, as Dr. Saab has already pointed out, Islam does recognize the value of technology. I mean, we have always been taught to embrace science as a part and parcel of the society we live in, development, evolution of all the things we use to make the society better. DNA, in this particular case of adultery, causes some other issues to arise. As Dr. Saab pointed out, we're not trying to prove a crime, we're trying to protect people from criminal intent that leads innocent people from being condemned. So if we're going to use DNA as the standard to measure if someone's committed a crime of sexual impropriety, you're asking people who may be innocent to go in front of a doctor to prove something they didn't do. That itself is an act that is shameful for most people, and would be a cause of embarrassment and humiliation. And this is exactly what the Quran wants to prevent, that we shouldn't attack innocent people based on our own whim, our own thoughts, or even if we saw something without enough proper evidence, this person didn't commit a crime in front of society. So society has no right to go behind that person and use other means to detect the crime, which we couldn't see as a society. And therefore, people's rights are being protected of their own privacy. And that's a big issue, I know, in the USA and probably here in UK. After the events of the recent, you can say, terror acts, all of the efforts to maintain privacy are in the side of the government being utilized to protect people. But the people saying we're losing our rights in the process. As Dr. Saab said, today you're talking DNA. What will you use tomorrow to prove I've committed a crime, which no one knows but me and God? And it should remain between me and God. So I'm just referring to this specific case of using DNA evidence to prove a crime of adultery or fornication. In terms of murder and other things, there it applies perhaps a different rule, where the crime has been committed, you can see your act is here, now you're trying to determine from the evidence you have whose blood was on, whose blood is tainted here, you can use that. I mean, these things seem to be more valid. But to use it as the evidence, the witness itself, to me, goes against the spirit, as Dr. Saab says. That is also questionable. It's not a perfect science. So you're leading to you're using imperfect science to try to make a decision on something which we condemn strongly in Quran, which is adultery. And to me, that would lead to an unjust situation. So we have to be careful.